Islamic religion in the time at Iran, and lucky enough for you guys, you get 4 PowerPoints from our group, so I'm lucky enough to be the last one of those. So, uh, so one of the things that I thought was going to be interesting to learn about Islam is like what the religion is based off of, and maybe how we could see that in Persepolis. And it turns out that there are 5 tenets of Islam, which are like the main pillars. You sometimes will hear them called pillars of the faith. And I think that reading these, you can kind of see maybe where some of the things from the text come from. The first of those is testimony, which is basically a public public profession of your faith. It can be in public. I think there's a number of places where it can happen. It's first when you take the faith, and it happens periodically throughout your time in the church. Prayer is also an essential element of Islam. You see it all the time. You've probably seen videos or pictures of people praying in mosques or prayer mats or things like that. There are 5 daily prayers that you will always do if you're Islamic, facing Mecca, which is the holy city for them. Fasting, there's a month in the Islamic lunar calendar, which has to do with you abstaining from food, drink, and sex from sunrise until sunset for the entire month of what they call Ramadan. The 4th pillar is almsgiving, which it's a lot like what you hear in Catholicism, almsgiving, giving to the poor, but it's kind of different in Islam. It's at the point, in modern times, it's set up so that it's about 2.5% of your income that goes directly towards the poor, and it's funneled through the church, the mosque system, and that. So it's less of a free giving donation, for example, at church when they pass around the basket or something like that. This is more of, if you're Islamic, this is planned, something that is going to happen. And then finally is the pilgrimage, or sometimes known as the Hajj, to Mecca. That happens at least once during a Muslim's lifetime. And what I saw from these is there's a lot of public elements of Islam. You see testimony is a public profession of your faith. Prayer, you often see pictures of people praying in public. Fasting, I don't necessarily know how you can fast food and drink basically for the entire day without having some physical effects that people can see in public. Almsgiving, it's more of a public donation, less of something you have to do at church when you just pass around the basket, you put it in, and you give it to the next person. This is directly coming out of your income. And pilgrimage, obviously going to Hajj, I'm not sure how far you might have to travel, but it could be hard to travel in secrecy all the way to Hajj. So having all these public elements, after I learned these, it kind of made it less surprising that there would be something instituted, like, for example, the veil. And I know it's been talked about a couple of times, and how there's societal background to veiling, like reducing the sexual urges between male and female. But there are also some religious backgrounds to the veil, and in addition to promoting a distinction between male and female, there's actually ties back to Islam's main prophet Muhammad. Quran and Hadith writings both say that his wives were veiled, but it's interesting that the Iranian government kind of goes a little further, because it never really mentions that this was something that was supposed to extend to all women. They just chose to make that step as something that would be necessarily logical, and something that all the people could say, okay, I guess that's where you got that from. So that is the religious background, if you will, for the veil. And then Garrett talked about the divide between Sunni and Shiite, so I do want to go a little bit into the specifics between them. Basically, an overview, it's more of a distinction to have a distinction. There's not many things that they do differently in the way they actually practice the faith. It's more basically just beginnings, and I think you can see that. It begins at the succession of the Prophet Muhammad. It really just comes to a divide between who Muslims thought should take over as the main leader of the faith after Muhammad. It was split between Ali, his son-in-law, and Abu Bakr, the father of his wife. And eventually Abu Bakr was made caliph, which maybe, as they're supported by the Sunnis, maybe Garrett stated how Sunnis have become almost a majority in the Muslim world, and I think that kind of sense of victory that they had almost in being the right one is probably what leads to Shia having only 30% of the Muslim world. And it is interesting to know that Iran and Iraq are 2 of the 4 predominantly Shia nations in the world, so they are definitely operating in a minority. And then one of the other important religious features at this time came with the clergy, and necessarily how there came to be. I didn't have that. Am I off airplane? Okay. I try that again. Okay. Someone take over. Okay, we're back. And that is interesting. As I was saying, one of the main differences in the faith over time became how they treated the clergy, and under the Shah, and it's back. Okay. Okay. So I guess if that's not going to work, I can probably just tell you it's not necessarily too complicated. During the Shah's reign and the Shah being instituted, like Garrett said, by Americans and primarily Western powers. Western powers are very into the idea of separation of church and state. So one of the things that the clergy was restricted to is limited power under the rule of the Shah. And as this revolution began and as the country transitioned into more of a faith-based nation with the institution of the Ayatollah and the Khomeini, the clergy were given definitely more power. They had various political and religious opportunities extended. For just an example of those, it was the clergy who, under the Ayatollah's command, went around to each household and advised them to have less children to control their population growth. So that's just an example of where maybe the clergy were taking over and having a greater role in what people saw every day. So my discussion question, and I'm sorry I couldn't put it up there, I'll try it again. Because it is rather long, I think. No panda? All right, good. Okay. So my discussion question is also related to religion. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran has been referred to commonly as a hybrid of theocratic and democratic elements, theocracy being a religion-based society. To which side would you say that the system is unbalanced, and maybe how can we see that in the text? So I did want to have you guys separate into small groups, and I know we only have one small group here with us, so however you guys want to see that, divide that up, or maybe just work together. Just one example of textual support, something you can back up is fine. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that.